welcome back to the Baseball Odds Watch podcast. I'm your host, Eddie. I'm sorry I've been gone for so long. I had to go away. I had to go get married in the Dominican Republic with my lovely wife. It was an amazing time. We were out there for the better part of a week, Sunday to Sunday. Thank you to all my guests who showed up. Shout out to everyone, as always, joining on Instagram Live. And, of course, all of you who are listening on Spotify or YouTube. One day we'll be on Apple TV or Apple Podcasts so that everyone can easily listen. But while I was away, a lot happened in baseball, and it affected the odds drastically in some cases. So let's dive right in. Let's not waste any more time. We'll start with the World Series odds as we're heading into the last month of the regular season, and they're pretty much the same as they were the last time we looked at them. Dodgers are still the favorites, just edging out the Phillies. They're at plus 350. The Phillies at plus 480. Yankees plus 550. Orioles plus 750. Houston rounds out the top five at plus 850. And then you got the Braves, Twins, Padres, and the Guardians rounding up the top 9. D-backs rounding out the top 10. But let's start in the American League Central, because that's where I think, while I was away, the most has happened, right? What happened while I was away? All of a sudden, the Kansas City Royals are plus 195 to win the American League Central. Minus 900 to make the playoffs. One game back from the division lead behind the Guardians, who are minus 135 favorites to win the division, as they're, again, only one game up. Minus 135 favorites because they won one game yesterday against the Royals. The Royals took 3 out of 4 in that series. I said it pretty much all year long that the Guardians needed an ace. You have no Shane Bieber. You're riding with Tanner Bybee as your one. He pitched 142 innings last year. He's at 143 already this year, and we still have a month to go. So he's starting to fade. He gave up 5 against Kansas City. He gave up 4 against Texas, and those were both 5-inning starts, and those are his last 2 starts. 5 against Kansas City, gives up 4 against Texas, his last 2 starts where he's only gone 5 innings. Steven Kwan has gone cold for the Guardians. He's only got 6 hits in the last 10 games. Meanwhile, the Royals, they've got the AL MVP runner-up in Bobby Witt Jr., and in his last 10 games, he's got 11 hits, 6 of them being extra base hits. The Guardians have the best closer in baseball. He's a Cy Young candidate in the American League out of the bullpen, and you still might not win the division in Stephen Vogt's first year as your manager. And guess what? They play each other another 4-game set in Kansas City starting on Monday. That's going to be a show. I can't wait for that series, because that's going to go major toward deciding this American League Central that I thought might go to the Twins. And now the Twins, they're only minus 182 to make the playoffs as a whole. They're holding on to that last AL wildcard spot right now. 3 games up on the Red Sox. They play each other in a few weeks. I don't think, though, that series is going to be the deciding factor for that third AL wildcard spot. I think things are going to happen between now and then to kind of shift that a bit, one way or the other, right? If the Red Sox start losing a bunch, then, I mean, maybe it won't even matter. So we got to see. But the Twins also have to face the Royals and the Guardians, the two teams fighting for that top spot. I'm just still so surprised, though, that all of a sudden this division is coming down to the Royals and the Guardians, and they're separated by one game. It's like the Guardians looked back and there was nobody behind them, and then they looked back again and the Royals were right there tapping them on the shoulder. So I had the Royals a wild card team, and now all of a sudden they might take the division. And it takes me back to the offseason when Vinny Pasquantino, the Pasquatch, came out and said, listen, I'm really excited for what this team's going to do this year. I didn't get it. I didn't look around at that roster and see too much of anything that was special, but now it makes a lot of sense. Look at what they're doing. I wouldn't say they were necessarily counted out, but I definitely wouldn't say anybody expected them to be divisional contenders, and here they are. So shout out to the Royals. And then there's the Tigers, which was a team that for a while I was saying they're going to be a playoff team, and now it didn't look like it for a while. It didn't look like it for a really long time for the Tigers, and now all of a sudden they're a potential team. They're 4.5 in the wild card, which at this point is steep ground to make up, but they're hot. And their schedule has them facing some of the teams that are in front of them. So the Tigers could very well make a run. They've got the AL Cy Young front runner right now in Skubal, so they can definitely pitch their way or find their way into it. They're playing behind me right now. They're losing to the Angels. But they could very well find themselves playing in October somehow. We're going to jump around this episode. Let's move over to the NL West because I want while you're here to get the important stuff, right? Podcast, that's how you do it. You play it in the background, you put it on while you're driving somewhere. So let's get to the NL West. And when you look at the division and the standings, right, there's really not much that jumps out at you really crazy. The Dodgers are still the favorites to win the NL West. The Dodgers are in first place in the National League West. If you're watching me on camera, I keep checking on my dogs. But the Diamondbacks are only 3 games back in the NL West from the Dodgers. Now, let's talk Dodgers a little bit. Minus 850 favorites to win that division as of right now, which is really steep. They're still in first place, like we said. Shohei Ohtani already has a 40-40 season. 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases. Right now, I think he's at 42 and 42. We've got a month left in the season, and they're saying he might have a 50-50 season. So if there was any doubt that that guy's going to win the MVP for the National League, throw it away. He's got it pretty much in the bag. Both MVPs are pretty much in the bag. But the Dodgers as a team, though, I keep saying it, I'm not as confident as Vegas and other people are in this Dodgers team. Tyler Glasnow, who was the ace they traded for, he's hurt now. He's got tendonitis. And I read a headline today, Thursday, 8/29, that said Tyler Glasnow is not getting better. And that's not good if you're the if you're the Dodgers, because you might have to head into the playoffs without your ace. And when it comes to the playoffs, you need everybody. You need all hands on deck. And if you're not going to have all hands on deck, then you need hands on deck that have been hands on deck for a while. Glasnow getting injured at this point in the season, on top of Yamamoto already being injured, doesn't bode well for the Dodgers' postseason or World Series hopes. A lot of background noise right now, so we're going to change that. Sorry for that break. But the Dodgers are still 3 games up on the Diamondbacks. And the Diamondbacks are minus 1,600 favorites to get into the playoffs. Not necessarily to win the division, obviously, being that they're 3 games back. But the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers play each other this weekend. That's going to be a huge series, and that's going to be fireworks, man, because this division is only a 3-game difference, or 3.5, right? 3-game difference as of right now. If both teams win or both teams lose, tomorrow's Friday, that series gets started, and if somehow the D-backs can sweep the Dodgers, they're tied for first coming out of it. Now, the biggest thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the Diamondbacks is Jordan Montgomery. We know what happened this offseason. He was a late signing this offseason, got a late start to the season. He's been moved to the bullpen by the Diamondbacks. He blames Scott Boras for the season he's having. He said in a quote, I think it was, "Everyone knows Boras butchered it." And he's fired Scott Boras and Boras Court for being his representation. My thing is this with Jordan Montgomery. I'm a Yankee fan. I remember Jordan Montgomery. He was never the ace. He was never the guy. He has never come close to being a Cy Young candidate. His best year was last year with St. Louis and Texas when he got traded. 3.20 ERA. Good, but it's nothing special. And when it comes down to it, Jordan Montgomery, you're the commodity. You're the player. You've got to make your own decisions. You've got to put the pressure on Scott Boras. You've got to put the pressure on these teams to make these decisions. Because it's not like if a team is going to look at Jordan Montgomery from last season and say, this is what we're getting. No, they're going to look at you since 2017 when you were on the Yankees to start your career and say, all of this is potentially what you're getting with Montgomery. The year you had a 6 ERA, the year you had a 5 ERA. So yeah, when you go and start making certain requests to your agent, you have to consider all of that because the organizations are going to. And now you're in the bullpen with the Diamondbacks. I believe you're only on a 1-year deal, so it doesn't look good for what's going to be your next year. It's your own fault. It's your own fault. You can't put everything on Boras. You've got to take some of the blame yourself. You've got to take some responsibility for what has become of your career. Moving on to the Padres. They've got the second wild card spot right now. They're minus 2,500 favorites to make the playoffs. So now it's looking like we'll have 3 teams representing the National League West in this postseason. So National League supremacy is shifting. Jackson Merrill is like a clear-cut Rookie of the Year right now. Merrill madness. I'm all for it. This guy's hitting walk-off bombs, bat flip bombs, and fielding his position amazingly. The guy is good. Padres system knew what it was doing with Jackson Merrill. Plus, Manny Machado's hitting for power right now. And they just signed Elias Diaz, who was dropped by the Rockies, who I don't understand that move. You've got Chris Bryant with an insane contract that you want to go ahead and drop the only guy that was an all-star for you last season. Fine. Like, I'm not going to argue, but I don't understand that move. So shout out to the Padres for going and getting Elias Diaz. I think that's a great move. Moving on, like I said, we're going to bounce around. We're going to go to the AL East. There's no order to the divisions this episode. And we know what's going on in the AL East, right? Divisions versus, or standings versus odds. There's not much of a difference in what's going on with the Orioles and the Yankees right now. The Yankees up 1 game on the Orioles. Right now, the Yankees minus 145 favorite. Let me just tell you guys something about this real quick and how quickly this changes. When I typed this up an hour ago, The Yankees were minus 145 favorites, and the Orioles were plus 115 underdogs to win the American League East. I have the odds in front of me right now, live, from FanDuel. And right now, the Yankees are minus 150 favorites to win the division, and the Orioles are plus 120. Maybe less than an hour difference. I don't even know. But this is all on the same day. That's how fickle this division has become. Because minus 10,000 are the odds for both of these teams to make the playoffs in general, be it as a wild card or as a divisional team. And I think that we can all agree that both of these teams are, barring a cataclysmic collapse, both of these teams will be there. Because it's not like another division that we're going to get to where it's either the division or go home. It's either the division or the top wild card spot. Right? The season that Anthony Santander is having for the Orioles puts him, to me, in the top 5 MVP candidates for the American League. Again, we know who's going to win it, and it's the guy in the other uniform, and Aaron Judge. Because he's on pace to break the record that he made a couple years ago. 62, he's supposedly on pace to hit 63 home runs this season. And he hit his 300th. So technically the guy's on pace to break Barry Bonds' all-time. I mean, if the Yankees didn't sign this guy when they needed to, it would have been insane. But I want to talk a little bit more about the Red Sox because right now, outside looking in, and I didn't see that coming. Maybe in the offseason, I had an idea this might be the case, but as the season progressed, I didn't think the Red Sox would be a team that wouldn't make the wild card. And right now, they're 3 games back from that bottom spot behind the Minnesota Twins. And minus 475 favorites to not make the playoffs. That's scary. I don't like that. I know we're rivals. I know I'm a Yankee fan, but I think baseball is funner when the Yankees and Red Sox are both competitive. Maybe innings are starting to catch up to the Red Sox pitchers. Tanner Houck and hasn't really looked as good lately. I know Masataka Yoshida's started to pick it up. But I think the biggest thing for them is in this last month of baseball, they've got to play the Yankees, they've got to play the Orioles, and the Twins who hold, again, that last wild card spot. So if they can win, they'll be in. If they lose, they're going to go home. And they just signed the guy with the best nickname in baseball, Dick Mountain, Rich Hill, and they called him up. And then, of course, the quirky stat probably of the year is Danny Jansen. They got him from Toronto. They had a game with Toronto earlier this season. They got postponed mid-game with Danny Jansen, the Blue Jay, at the plate when the game got called. And then a couple days ago, they picked back up that game, and Danny Jansen, the Red Sox, was put into the game as catcher by Alex Cora. So he's the first guy ever to play for both teams in the same game. I think that could happen like maybe some other time, right? Like if a guy gets traded at the deadline, the day of the deadline, and he gets traded by the team on the other side, like I'd like to see that happen in that way. I think doing it this way is a little bit of cheating, but whatever. That's just my opinion. Let's move on to the American League West. Boy, have things changed in the American League West. Like, I feel like last time I talked to you guys, it was like, wow, the American League West is competitive. The Astros turned things around, and now it's the Astros are running away with the American League West. Odds versus standings. The Astros are minus 750 favorites now to win that division. Remember what I said about the Dodgers? Minus 850. The Astros now minus 750 to win that division. Alex Bregman is hot. Good. It's a contract year for him. You had a feeling that it was going to happen for him going into free agency, and he's doing it. The guy, you can't get pitches past him right now. Yordan Alvarez is also hot. But the young pitching staff for the Astros is really looking good right now. Meanwhile, in Seattle, we know that pitching staff is good, but here we are in a position where the Mariners are minus 520 favorites to not even make the playoffs this year. They made the moves at the deadline, and it didn't really start turning things around. Then they asked Scott Service about it, and Scott Service said it'll get better. Wrong answer. And I think the Mariners agreed that that's the wrong answer because they subsequently fired Scott Service. Now, there's obviously still time. They're 3.5 back from the Astros. They play each other toward the end of the season, at the end of the month. The problem is that the way things sit, and we said this last podcast, for the AL West, it has to be the division. Because everyone started off so bad in that division, if you don't win that division, Mariners or Astros, then you won't be in the playoffs. And I think that's going to be a sadder thing if the Mariners don't make it. The Astros have made it years in a row. I think it's 7 years in a row they've been there. So if they don't make it, it's all right. But if the Mariners don't make it with the pitching staff they have right now, that's bad. That's really bad. So let's move on to the National League East. Odds versus standings in the NL East, and there's no surprise, right? We know that the Phillies are well in control of the NL East, minus 1,200 odds to win that division. One of the best teams in baseball. I mean, there's not much more we can say about the Phillies. They don't have a lot of holes, and the holes that they do have, they kind of make up for it on the back end. The Braves are somehow still hanging around. They hold the third wild card spot in the National League. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Minus 600 favorites to make the playoffs right now. Somebody said you can't just leave a good team alone. You have to kill them. And that's essentially what's happening with the Braves. They haven't been killed off. They haven't gotten that final blow. They've been able to find ways to win games, whether it's Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez coming out and shoving, which, by the way, remember, this is Reynaldo Lopez's first year as a starting pitcher, right? And Chris Sale is up there in age, and he looks phenomenal when he takes them out. He's scary. Or whether it's Marcell Ozuna getting them through it offensively. Matt Olson's starting to pick it up with the home runs lately. He's starting to get hot. Whatever it is, the Braves are just finding a way to hang around, and they might just hang around into the playoffs. Why? Because the wild card sits with them in the third spot, and the team behind them is the New York Mets, who they can't find ways to win games sometimes, and then they'll go on streaks where they're like an impossible team to beat. But there's one team that historically has had their number, and it's the Atlanta Braves. And I don't think that this year is any different. Guess what? The Mets, though, they do play the Braves and the Phillies still this season. So this up-down kind of topsy-turvy season, if the Mets can find the way to get an up for the rest of the month of September, for the rest of the season, they can find their way in. But right now, sitting at 4 games back, I don't see it happening. Vegas doesn't see it happening. Vegas sees it happening for the Braves, and it's unfortunate for the Mets. They looked so promising at certain points in the season, but promise isn't going to get you anywhere. You've got to win games. You've got to win important games. You've got to win divisional games. So if they can't beat the Braves, we won't see them in October. Moving on to the NL Central. Boy, I feel like we've flown through this. Moving on to the NL Central, our last division that we'll cover, and it's because there's really not too much coming out of the NL Central when it comes to news. I couldn't even find the divisional odds for the Brewers. That's how far ahead they are and how confident Vegas is in the Brewers taking the NL Central. They're 9 games up. They have the biggest lead in their division of any team in any division. The second place team is the Chicago Cubs. They're a great team. I've said it all year, they're a great team. They just haven't been able to do it. They were in last place at one point this season. They're not there. The rest of this division just isn't there. And the Brewers are the team that's capitalized on a division that's just been beating up on each other. The Cubs, 5.5 games back, though, from the wild card. So it's not impossible, but it's kind of going to be tough. I think it's just time to look at the future if you're the Cubs. I think they're doing that already. Minus 3,500 favorites to not even make it. So I think that's done with. The NL Central's kind of done with. There was so much promise in the Reds. There was so much promise in the Pirates, especially with that run the Pirates went on where I became a fan. It just kind of sank from there. Only thing I'll say for the Pirates is moving O'Neal Cruz to center field. He's really big, really tall with a cannon arm. I like that decision. And so that's going to take us into my final thoughts for this episode. And it's with O'Neal Cruz moving to center field, Fernando Tatis Jr. also moving to the outfield, leaving Elly De La Cruz as one of the very few shortstops left that cover insane amounts of ground. Let's talk errors real quick. I feel like the aforementioned Cruz, Tatis, and De La Cruz are some of the best defensive shortstops in the game. I think they just get a bad rap and get beat up by the scoring judges that decide errors versus hits. I mean, these guys are getting to balls that most shortstops don't have a remote chance at making a play on. Then when they can't make that play, they're getting penalized. It's a little unfair. You're not scoring Anthony Volpe the same way you are Elly De La Cruz because their range is just totally different. I just think we need a more clearly defined metric for defense and a better way of ruling errors other than the rule of thumb, which is if it hit the glove, then it's an error because some balls are just not playable by some infielders and some are somewhat playable for other ones. Why should we be penalizing players with a lot of range for not being able to make plays that other players wouldn't even have a chance at? So with that, we've got some big series coming up this weekend. First, Red Sox, Tigers. Those are two teams. Oh my God, I didn't talk about the Tigers in the AL Central. Well, I did talk about the Tigers. Red Sox and Tigers, two teams that are in the wild card picture. The Tigers are, I believe, 5.5 back, 4.5 back behind the Red Sox, who are 3 back in that wild card. So both of those teams need to win those games. The Tigers losing 3-0 right now in the 7th inning to the Angels behind me. Braves and Phillies. Again, we talked at NL East. We've talked about how the Braves are just lingering around and the Phillies are kind of well in control in that division, but 5 games up, it's rivalry games, first and second place teams in the NL East. We got the Padres. They're going to go to Tampa and try to beat up on Tampa to help their wild card cause. The Yankees, they're hosting the Cardinals this weekend. The Cardinals kind of out of it. The Yankees hope to capitalize on that and maybe grow their lead on the Orioles. The Orioles are in Colorado against a really bad Rockies team with a lot of thin air and a lot of guys who can lift and launch on that Oriole lineup. They hope to win and maybe overtake the Yankees this weekend, but some of the bigger series are Royals and Astros, two teams trying to win their respective divisions. We talked about the Astros taking theirs, and the Royals are one game back from the Guardians as of right now. And then the Dodgers and D-backs, to me, is the biggest one. First and second place teams in the NL West, as of right now, separated by 3 games. And guess what? They're going to play 3 games. So if things sit, like we said earlier, this could be the one that decides it. Be on the lookout for the GoFundMe link to get Baseball Odds Watch to Japan for opening day between the Dodgers and the Cubs. When the playoffs come, we'll be back to our Odds Watch lives. Will be a little bit of a different format. And thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you to everyone who joined the live, and see you guys next week.